Okay, draft recap, Lions edition. I'm going to be doing one of these of every single team. So if you want to see me talk about your team, that will be coming out. My plan is to get them all done this weekend. We'll see how well it goes because 32 videos is a lot. But let's talk about the Lions, who had a weird draft. They were, there's no getting around it. So I have a chart next to me. What you see on the list is every single player they drafted. And then from left to right, it's the position they play, where they were drafted, and where the consensus big board ranks them. So for Jahmyr Gibbs, he is a halfback. He was the consensus big board had him, he was selected at number 12. Consensus big board did have him as a first rounder. That is important to note. So while a lot of people were very shocked by this move and how high it was, and don't get me wrong, it was an insane reach. Like, there's just no getting around that. It was a very far reach for what you typically see for a pick number 12. It's not like they got someone who was completely off the board. That being said, this is just, listen, I know a lot of Lions fans are going to watch this video because of the fact that it's talking about the Lions. If you're a Lions fan, I have no issue with you getting excited about this pick. You're getting a good player, someone who's going to be a day one contributor for a team that's trying to win a championship or at least make the playoffs year one. And, running backs, while maybe not the most valuable position, do at the very least tend to hit right away. And I've even said, if you're trying to compete, I don't necessarily hate the idea of drafting a running back in the first round. I would never do it at 12, though, and especially because I just don't think Gibbs is quite on the level of a top 15 selection on a running back. I mean, you traded away Swift for a fourth rounder. I think he could have gotten you probably similar production. I think Gibbs very well has a higher ceiling, but, I also don't love Gibbs' blocking. That's kind of a me thing, so I don't know if he's a pure 3-down back as well as that, which is just, it's why I don't love the pick. I don't know how many people do love the pick. And, you're going to see down the list, there is a ton of reaches. There just is. Jack Campbell, he's someone who, this one I'm going to defend a little bit more. He was 42 on the consensus big board. I actually had him as a first rounder, though, and I only had 27 first round grades this year. So I kind of understand why you'd want him. To me, he is the one linebacker in this draft class worth taking with a premium pick. So getting him, pick number 18, it's high. It is. There's no getting around it. This is a reach for Jack Campbell, but he is someone who, again, I think will be a good player, and I think will help them out. It's interesting because there's, the Gibbs and Campbell selections have gotten a lot of criticism. It's not out of the question these two guys could be, offensive and defensive rookie of the year candidates year one, but not necessarily the most valuable of positions is the issue. So we'll see how it works out. Then we have another reach, another guy who was, drafted at 34 on a consensus big board, was 59. So guy who most people felt like could have gone a little bit later. He ends up, Michael Mayer was still on the board at the time of this selection. They decided to go with Sam Laporta, and there's things to like about Sam Laporta for sure. Player out of Iowa who, tight ends out of Iowa. They get a lot of guys who get into NFL out of that school, so there is that some NFL pedigree. He's someone who I think could be, again, a good tight end for them. I don't know how good of a receiving threat he is at times. I think his route running and some of his ball skills would be a bit of an issue. So he was kind of considered a late second round tight end. That's probably when I would have selected him. But at the same time, who knows with this stuff? Tight ends are a little bit fluky. So if you like him and you think you trust your ability to evaluate tight ends, go ahead. We have a pick that for me, this next pick, I think kind of saves this from being a potential disaster draft, in my opinion. And I think actually makes it a very interesting draft. Brian Branch, I loved. I thought that he could have been selected with a top 15 pick. He ends up going at pick 45. So I'm not sure exactly why the NFL didn't see what I saw in him. Maybe it's, part of it is, again, not a premium position. And this is, part of the positional value argument is, for some of these positions like safety, why you don't draft one in round one is because you can get a Brian Branch in round two. You can say similar things about running backs and linebackers, but at the same time, now that you got, in my opinion, 3 players, and really I would say 4 players right off the bat that should be immediate contributors. So they should have gotten some value because they had a lot of draft capital coming in, but they did at least get some value. It's not like they're drafting bust here necessarily, and I guarantee you, their draft, they're going to end up getting more, they're not going to end up with the 32nd most talent out of this draft. That's certainly true, but I'd be shocked if they end up with the most talent out of this draft. Then we have this was a surprise, but not a crazy one. Some people really hated this pick. Hendon Hooker, I kind of understand it. I mean, Hendon Hooker is a guy who, again, I had him as my quarterback number 4, actually. I had him ahead of Will Levis, who I didn't have a first-round grade on Levis. I had a late first-round grade on Hooker. He goes very early in the third round, excuse me. And, listen, coming off an injury, how much will he be able to play, if at all, his first season? I don't know. But should at least be, once he's healthy, a day one backup. Again, kind of just the book on him. Pretty good tape last year, but he also is a very old at this point, 25 years old. So for someone who's getting drafted, that's old. Obviously, for a person, that's very young. But, because of that, those are the things that I think about with Hooker. I'm a little surprised, but I don't know. I think they just feel like spending an early third rounder on a backup is probably a good move, and who knows? Maybe he has potential for more than that. So don't hate that pick necessarily. The other three are, again, you have 3 reaches. I mean, one of them is Broderick Martin, who was selected with pick 96. And again, once we're getting into the hundreds, you can kind of have more freedom to mix things up and change things. But again, the reality is, when someone isn't even a top 200 player in the consensus big board, that hit rate is practically 0. So even if you liked him, and again, the consensus big board isn't necessarily the NFL consensus big board, but still, for what it's worth, Pro Football Focus was higher on him. They had him at 163 on their big board. Still not great, though. Still a bit of a reach. Again, very big player. The size is definitely, interesting, and I think they might just view him as someone who could be an interior defensive lineman run stuffer, which, again, he could be a contributor at 96, and maybe that's why they selected him. There probably was some better players on the board. Then we have a player who wasn't even a top 450 player on the consensus big board, Colby Sorstal. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. And again, it's kind of hard sometimes to do these really off-the-wall picks because, believe it or not, I did not get over 140 players deep in my evaluation. I evaluate sort of the top 100 plus, prospects, but I can't do everyone. He does not have a PFF page currently on the profile, so I can't see his analytics unless I did some deep diving. But again, a bit of a surprise pick there. And then finally, in round 7, early in round 7, Antoine Green, a wide receiver, which, a lot of times those guys end up being more special teamers than anything else. So those are the picks. And again, they had a lot of draft capital entering this. And, Mike Renner of PFF, I think, described this first round the best of the Lions, where he said the Lions went to a steakhouse and ordered a cheeseburger. And that kind of feels like the thing where it's like they still got something good. You'll take a cheeseburger, but there were maybe better options on the table for the Lions. That's just kind of how I view it. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.